Power and wonder. These are the legacies of one of the most influential and remarkable groups of people in the history of the human sphere. Born far outside of it, those who sought the truth were the first to see past their own short-sighted ambitions to embrace a new way of life, perhaps accepting Alexander Kerensky's dream before any of his other ideological and political descendants. Their mysterious ways and their military might are truly marvels to be appreciated, even if this pathway proved to be misguided and bound for tragedy in the end. Even in the latter eras, the reverberations from this deadly feline can still be felt. Clan Novacat was truly one of a kind, and in their own image, they forged a beast of steel and myomers that embraces everything that they are and were. When one looks upon their mighty effigy, even if their fear at its lethal presence subsides, they will still be awed by the power and wonder that it so perfectly embodies. Every enemy of Clan Novacat learned to respect what this brutalizing behemoth could bring to the battlefields of the Inner Sphere and beyond. So, come with me on an adventure as we cast our worries into the flames and see a vision together of what was, what is, and what could come to pass. In this piece, together we will be examining the history and associations of one of the most intriguing clans, as well as one of the most exceptional heavy battle mechs to ever stride its way across a battlefield. Let us see noble warriors, both in blood and steel, for what they were intended to be, and what they are, both of which who bear a name that will be burned into the histories forever. Novacat. The wise Nicholas spoke to them all, through the haze of their anguish. His passion flowed through the doubt. His conviction tore at the fear. He was become the living legend. Philip listened and believed he would follow this great man, as he had followed the Father, into Exodus and hope. The Remembrance, Clan Novacat, Passage 14, verse 1, lines 1 through 9. Unconventional. That is the single word that most adequately and accurately describes the mighty clan that was named for the Novacat by Nicholas Kerensky, the father of the clans. Their journey begins long before their totem mech, however, but it is a tale that informs who they are and who made the weapon of war itself. And it is a story of visions, honor, and lacking the foresight they always believed they possessed. As with all of the founding clans, Nicholas Kerensky personally selected those who would be their first khans, the people to enact his vision for society. The rigid, authoritarian system put in place by the son of the great General Alexander Kerensky, the last full military commander of the Star League Defense Forces, and the vanquisher of the usurper Stefan Amaris, was anything but traditional at the time, and involved dividing people into castes, while ensuring that warriors from each selected clan would have their genes passed down through an artificial system of iron wombs, in order to eliminate the connection of family wherever possible. Notably, family, at least in the eyes of Nicholas, was something to be vilified, as it flew in the face of much of his survival of the fittest, meritocratic beliefs. Even amongst civilians, the family unit was functionally shattered, beyond what could scrape by unnoticed, or being too ingrained to be fully severed. Each and every one of Kerensky's clans can trace their core warriors' ancestry, and that of their leaders, back to the Star League Defense Forces prior to the Exodus, with one exception. Khan Philip Drummond had been, in another life, well before the Exodus, one Major Philip Drummond of the Rimworld's army. He'd been loyal, truly loyal, to House Ameris throughout his life up until the coup that destroyed the Star League's core, the Terran hegemony, and shortly after, the Rimworld's Republic itself. When Alexander Kerensky and the Star League Defense Forces' wrath reached the usurper's holdings, his true realm, not the now renamed hegemony he'd stolen, Philip Drummond, having seen his now treacherous master for who he truly was, pledged his loyalty to General Kerensky instead. In doing so, he used his skills and his knowledge of the Rimworld's army to help the defense forces overwhelm those within the Rimworld's Republic, and went on to continue his aid throughout the campaign to liberate Terra and its surrounding regions. After this grinding and wearing trial by fire, Drummond, having worked within an organization where, at first, he wasn't trusted or liked, was amongst the many who took up the cause to follow Kerensky into the exodus from the Inner Sphere. Drummond left everything he knew behind in order to go on this journey to save mankind from the potential destruction the SLDF would inevitably unleash upon the people now living in the divided Great Houses, should it have stayed within known human space. The nightmare that Alexander Kerensky and his followers were attempting to escape from pursued them into the depths of space. Mutiny and eventually civil war tore through the once proud defenders of the Star League in the Pentagon worlds. Philip and his now longtime partner, Anna Rossi, the mother of his 3 children and a freedom fighter from the Terran resistance against the tyrant Stefan Ameris, were horrified by what was transpiring, and opted to escape the turmoil by joining a community trying to distance itself from the war. Unfortunately, that community was mostly made up of people from the former Free Worlds League, and vendettas have a long reach. Lyran nationalists who emerged from the fragmented SLDF assaulted the colony, killing swathes of people, including 2 of the couple's children, leaving only their daughter Sandra alive. This was a key moment where the founder of Clan Novicat found himself in the embrace of Nicholas Kerensky and his promises of order and restoration. Philip became a warrior once more, and his partner embraced a role as a communications and logistics officer. Even then, fighting in a civil war became too much. After participating in a series of raids for their new goals, the pair would take their daughter and depart with Nicholas Kerensky on a second exodus. In this new exile, from the clan homeworld of Strahd-Mechty, Nicholas Kerensky sculpted a new society, one not bound by family or the traditions of the Inner Sphere, but instead built around warriors of select bloodlines and the virtues of combat. This new uniform way of life was a caste system, which would be run by the warriors first and foremost, with the other castes, be they labor, science, merchant, or technician, being lesser on the totem pole. 20 clans were spawned, each venerating an animal, barring Clan Bloodspirit, and Drummond was rewarded for his invaluable intelligence services to Alexander Kerensky during the Ameris Civil War, and was further rewarded for rallying to join Nicholas's second exodus when the time came, with leadership over one of them, namely Clan Novicat. Dedicated to a vicious feline-like animal found in the Pentagon worlds, this ruthless predator was meant to be the inspiration for those who dwelled within the clan, and they proved to be every bit as deadly as the father of the clans intended, when their fury was turned upon those that had not accepted the new way of the clans. Operation Klondike was a military campaign launched by Nicholas Kerensky and his followers to end the madness of the Pentagon Wars, and it most certainly did succeed in this objective, despite the heavy price that the new clans paid to achieve a complete victory over those who had torn the SLDF apart. The vanquished had descended upon one another in a grim parody of the forever war being waged within the inner sphere, and so suffered disunity and defeat. The Novacats in all of this performed exquisitely well, and were noted for their ability to pick their targets apart as if on a whim, consistently striking for the weakest points of their enemies' mechs and lines, giving them almost a legendary status amongst their clan peers. With his new clan victorious, and having avenged his lost children, Khan Drummond, now advancing in age, found himself in a perilous position. His body was breaking down in his increasingly elderly state, and even the Star League's medical technology couldn't stall it much longer, it seemed. But the real knockout blow came after he began to develop a degenerative disease that impacted his judgment and reflexes. It appeared he would soon be disposed of by the clan system, and either would be killed or forced into humiliating resignation. However, this trajectory changed when his only remaining child, the daughter he had with his partner Anna, tested to achieve the status of Mechwarrior. Despite the taboo of family within the clans, Philip had retained his ties to his spouse and daughter, even if secretly, which was not and is not an uncommon occurrence for some within the clans even centuries later, though notably this is frowned upon in the eyes of the society, and this played a role in Drummond attempting to pass his mantle of Khan over to his biological daughter. It is noted that Sandra inherited his natural athletic ability and leadership traits, and from her mother, who raised her, she learned her tactical skills and sense of conviction. His daughter also inherited one additional key trait from her mother, which was a sense of spiritualism and attempting to connect with it for guidance. The Khan confided in his daughter that indeed he was declining, and he was concerned about the future of the clan, which he had founded and been entrusted with. Sandra took this information and then retreated into her mother's home, going to her private sanctuary, or taking to meditation and fasting. 3 days later, she emerged, after seeing a vision of how best to resolve this crisis. She decided to replace her father as Khan. In order to do so, she needed political support and a blood name. Only months later, she passed the trials necessary to acquire such a name, and to honor her mother, she elevated the name Rosie instead of Drummond. After completing her tasks, she challenged her father to a trial of grievance, on the basis that he was no longer suited to rule the clan. Instead of doing battle in the circle of equals, though, she offered her father a chance to step down, to avoid being killed. He did just that, accepting defeat without a fight. This clear act of brazen disregard for tradition could only have negative consequences. The new Khan was immediately challenged by furious members of her clan, outraged by the obvious act of nepotism and favoritism. They were, however, no match for her skills as a warrior, and she went on to defeat every challenge that tried to repulse her, earning her father's position in this trial by fire. And in her vision, the wolf howled, but the Novacat paced steadily on, undisturbed by the petty battles. Others fought, trying to cage it within bars of thoughtless sameness. The Novacat gazed straight ahead, its heart and mind devoted to the ways of seeing, devoted to a more perfect life. The Remembrance, Clan Novacat, Passage 50, Verse 5, lines 26 through 32. Now solidified in her role as Khan, Rosie once more retreated into her sanctuary to fast and meditate, in order to receive visions that would help her to understand the right path to shape and guide Clan Novacat into the future. Rosie emerged 5 days later with what she sought. A vision for where she desired the clan to go. She believed she could create an even more perfect society than the father of the clans, something already hinging on the dangerous, especially given she was ruling during a time where Nicholas Kerensky was still alive. She loosened the reins on the merchant caste, having seen what her mother's caste had achieved by being raised directly by her. What became a bit of an issue, even amongst her supporters, was that it became clear that Sandra made her decisions through mystical visions, rather than through analysis and critical thinking. No one, after the failed challenges of her detractors, moved to usurp her over the issue, though this was to become something that was only more pronounced. And those who once supported her now began to consider actions to remove her as soon as the opportunity presented itself. Khan Rosi's first official act as leader was to make the position of Oathmaster within the clan, and assigned one of her key personal disciples to it, namely Liu Cheng. Though this display of cronyism did not last long, as Nicholas Kerensky denounced it as such, and demanded a trial take place for such a placement, which concluded in one Lucy Morris winning the honor of being the first Oathmaster. The new office was meant to ensure that everyone within the clan followed traditions, and it was even to enforce discipline, as well as the general clan belief system. The title also was clearly meant to, and eventually would become, the central figurehead for spiritual well-being of the clan. Oathmasters going forward, if future Khans lacked visions, became integral in performing this role for the clan's decision-making, and often gave them more power and authority than the ruler of the clan as a result. From this point forward, Khan Rosi attempted to shape her clan to be one of spiritual explorers, while also not forgetting their obligations or training as warriors. She believed that marrying spiritual and mystical exploration with a rigid warrior's code would hone her clan as no other. For all within her clan to embrace this, from the lower castes to her peers, she wrote The Ways of Seeing, in which she described her mother's mystic experiences and her own visions. It outlined the many rituals her people were to embrace and perform. This indoctrination worked with time, and the Novacats changed, fundamentally, from the path of any of the other children of Kerensky. Following her visions in everything, even in her personal life, the Khan created bitter, long-standing enemies, such as her failed and catastrophic romance with one Sakan Ismail of Clan Smoke Jaguar. This passionate relationship was started and ended due to her following her spiritual journey. Her reliance on visions also resulted in Sandra supporting, even if quietly, Clan Wolverine during many of their troubles. And this is something that earned her and her clan a reckoning for her support of the now unnamed clan. After their annihilation, even if it was quiet, she was challenged directly by Khan Winston of Clan Wolf, where she was killed during the trial after her primary weaponry had been disabled. There was a risk that perhaps the transformation she'd started would have died with her, had it not been for the return of Philip Drummond. Drummond, after recovering in an advanced research center, having been cured of his primary ailment, where his partner, Anna, informed him as to the goings-on within the clan in his absence. When he discovered that his daughter had been killed in the wake of Clan Wolverine's annihilation, he returned to guide his people once more. Despite his advanced age, he won a series of grueling trials to become his clan's third Khan, making him both the first and the third to hold this position. His rule reinforced what his daughter had started, and he continued to reign until his death at 112 years old. Things then became calm for the Novacats during the Golden Century, beyond innovations made in technology and trade, such as the rediscovery of the concept of futures and investment. It was the politics that followed this century that saw the greatest movement, though, because Clan Novacat joined the Crusader cause, but only insofar as that they believed in its principles, as they believed, arrogantly, due to their visions, spirituality, and incredibly voracious economic appetite, that they had to be the clan that would bring about the liberation of the Inner Sphere. It was only after the arrival of the outbound light that even the Novacats had to set aside their own immediate desires and accept that the invasion had to begin before their window of opportunity closed, even if it was under their old rival, Clan Smoke Jaguar. Though their seer's premonitions gave mixed, if not grave, portents to this decision. This turned out to be more than fateful, and it would have consequences that would ripple throughout the history of mankind and Clan Novacat. I saw the cat attacking by the hundreds, flanked only by the bear, the wolf, the jaguar, the falcon, and the shark. Our enemy stood divided and had not yet fallen. I knew that we would earn glory early in the war. I saw a burning rain of fire that struck from the sky in wanton destruction of people and resources. I knew our enemy would stand fast against the clans. I saw a black cloud threatening the cat. I knew an older enemy than the Inner Sphere sought to overwhelm us. Oathmaster Bicken Winter's Vision, 3049. Operation Revival launched in 3049, and Clan Novacat was not amongst the frontline clans that entered the periphery and Inner Sphere when the Great Homecoming finally arrived. Khans LaRue and Carnes had won the right to participate in minor battles at the beginning of the campaign, and they'd bid well during the trial of refusal prior to the attack, meaning they were next in line to invade should the opportunity present itself. Clan Novacat were the true first reserve clan, waiting in the wings of the invasion. The primary invading clans, Smoke Jaguar, Wolf, Jade Falcon, and Ghost Bear, tore through the periphery power known as the Oberon Confederation, of course, and then proceeded to carve into the realms of the Inner Sphere, most prominently the Free Rosselhig Republic, Draconis Combine, and Federated Commonwealth. Though in this time, Novacat officials met with Comstar, which caused their Oathmaster, Bicken Winters, to have a complete meltdown, seeing Presenter Focht as the embodiment of the clan's destruction from her visions. However, the Presenter was allowed to go on his way to his final destination. And it turns out this was more than a little prophetic. The Novacat's own fortunes remained relatively conflict-free until, of course, the death of Leo Showers, Ilclan of the clans and the overall leader of the invasion. This had the effect of halting the assault across the Inner Sphere in order for the clans to elect a new leader. This process concluded with one Ulrich Kerensky of Clan Wolf becoming Ilclan of the clans, and in part he achieved this position through support from an unexpected place, namely Clan Novacat. The Cats understood if Kerensky won, their own chances of being activated as an invasion force would be increased. The Cats got their wish, but it turned out to be less than what they'd truly wanted, as they were consigned to the same corridor as their rivals, Clan Smoke Jaguar. What followed was a brutal year of fighting against the Draconis Combine, and eventually against the doom they had been warned of by their very Oathmaster. The worlds the Jaguars ceded to the Novacats were all planets they'd already pulled garrisons from, leaving the Cats with a mess from the very start. Though by the end of the trials to control these planets, they had established reasonable relations with the people they now governed. After getting a handle on these problems, Khan LaRue then moved against the Smoke Jaguars on Courchevel, managing to scrape a victory out of the situation. Though the most important conquest made by the Novacats during the invasion against their Inner Sphere adversaries was the world of Irisi. Beta Galaxy had been sent to establish control over the world, and would fight ruthlessly to do so against the local garrison, as well as the 18th Dairon regulars. The planet was home to Lexitech, a mech and specialist design factory. Unfortunately, the facilities were considered so valuable that the Combine couldn't muster a reasonable defense using the planet's heavily built-up areas, for risk of damaging vital facilities, forcing the experienced urban fighters defending the planet to engage the Novacats outside of their preferred regions. This handicap was to be insurmountable for the defenders. Beta Galaxy Commander Rossi took to the field aggressively and mercilessly. Fighting without Zelbringen shortly after the battles began, there was really only one path the battle could take, but the defenders did stretch out the fight in a brutal fashion, forcing the Novacats to burn forests and fight desperate battles for several days. Elemental forces finished the job, seizing the planet's vital war-making facilities in the last day, as the DCMS forces were left in ruins, despite their determined but flawed defense. The LAM facilities were repurposed after the equipment to build the machines on board were deliberately destroyed by the clan occupiers, for no other reason than their hatred of the designs. The Khans of Clan Novacat barely noticed, however, as they were too busy planning an ill-fated venture on Luthien. Joining Clan Smoke Jaguar, Alpha Galaxy and Delta Galaxies dropped to the field seeking the honor of claiming the Combine capital, while working in tandem with Clan Smoke Jaguar. 5 galaxies in total hit the world, but only 2 left by the end of it, with over 50% losses being sustained by both clans in total. Clan Novacat was the first to break and quit the field, in what was the decisive battle on the Combine front of the campaign. The Novacats struggled to recover much of what was lost on Luthien, but Beta Galaxy and their understrength remaining forces did press ahead, capturing more worlds for the clan. The final planet taken before the end of hostilities was the world of Kenowit, which the Novacats barely managed to secure, before the doomed encounter on Tukid. And it was indeed a doomed encounter for the Novacats, as this was truly their first step on the road to ruin. The battle for Tukid was, of course, the trial the clans accepted against Comstar in order to seize control of Terra from the religious fanatics that held it. For Clan Novacat's part, they were given the task of taking Tost and Joji, and ultimately, they failed to achieve their goals. Clearly unable to see the future at the time, Clan Novacat defeated itself before the battle had even begun, with Khan Severin LaRue opting for mechs in his units to be outfitted for rapid, hard-hitting, ammunition-fed configurations. In other words, ones with poor sustainability in the field. The other major problem the Cats faced was that their Khan opted to drop into the Comguard positions, using an unorthodox hover drop approach, rather than deploying at a distance and engaging in a more traditional manner. This was very much the shock and awe approach, only this was, in essence, a tactic that immediately sent the Cat forces into chaos and disarray. Unable to support their drop appropriately with enough air cover, they were interdicted by defending Comguard aerospace squadrons. Originally planning for Khan LaRue to take Tost with half of their forces, and saw Khan Lucian Carnes taking Joji with the other half, things had a real chance for success, had their fighter cover been adequate, or had they been better prepared. Instead, one of the main command dropships, the Cat's Maw, exploded as a single Comstar pilot gave their life to crash into the ship's vitals in order to cease their approach. A cluster of the best Mechwarriors and a further cluster of elementals were taken out of play. Killed, it turns out, before the burning wreck of the dropship smashed into the surface as nothing but debris and the broken dreams of victory. Remaining elements of Alpha, Beta, and Gamma galaxies that made their landing were immediately then ripped into by Comguard bombing runs, as well as prepared defenders. The entire drop to take Tost was a debacle, in other words. Given no room to breathe, the Novacats were even further caught off guard by a counteroffensive by their blakest opponents, not even giving them the time to repair and refit any of their mechs near their landing zones. Personal pride appears to be the next culprit for the defeat, as Khan LaRue overruled Sakon Carnes, who had warned him that they needed to adjust their forces' plans. The Khan shut down his recommendation and stated that despite their depleted condition, they would take both objectives still. The disaster was complete. The Novacats would be condemned to a devastating and humiliating defeat, rather than a potential minor victory, one that was still possible before LaRue forced his soldiers into a hopeless venture. Advancing on both objectives with inferior forces after managing to scrape together cohesive units, the Novacats attacked their Comguard adversaries, and faced the doom that their Oathmaster had warned them of years prior. It did not take long for both of their pincers to be caught out of order by the blakest opposition, forcing the Cats into a rout and a humiliating withdrawal, despite the bravery and ferocity they showed whenever battle was met. It was a battle of objectives, not of martial prowess, so despite inflicting harrowing losses on Fox forces, it did nothing to change the result. But this battle was the last bell for the Crusader Novacat that was. It was destroyed, even if not in the way that the Oathmaster imagined, because the Novacat that emerged from this harrowing trial was a changed one, and as it rebuilt, it would embrace a new path forward, though it was to be one with a tragic conclusion all the same. Do not let yourselves be swayed by the lies of the inner sphere. Do not be tainted with the seeming largesse of these crippled societies. A clansman, be he a warrior or laborer, earns what he has, by force or by toil, and knows that it is his and no other's. These worlds themselves, and our new fellow castmen, we earned. Our clan did, by right of conquest. From Imprimus We Conquer, a Science Cast pamphlet, 3064. Operation Revival had displayed a series of shortcomings when it came to clan military doctrine. Built more for quick, decisive duels, rather than brutal battles of attrition and stamina, many times clan forces, when unable to secure a quick victory, would find themselves ground down and destroyed by their inner sphere counterparts. The Jade Falcons met this fate on Twycross, while the Jaguars and Novacats experienced it on Luthien. Then all the clans, save Ghost Baron Wolf, met this consequence on Tukiad. But even before the great trial that the clans lost against the Comguards, there had been the beginnings of developments and changes to their military acquisitions and tactics. One of the biggest divergences from traditional clan Omnimech development and procurements was a machine known as the Nightjeer. An Omnimech developed by Clan Jade Falcon starting in 3051, and one beginning production and distribution by 3052. It was a huge divergence from the traditional methodology of clan-heavy Omnimechs. Every major clan Omnimech used by the clans in the heavy mech range during the invasion had moved at around 86 kilometers per hour, keeping with what the clans considered optimal battlefield mobility. They traversed ground with the same speed as an inner sphere medium striker formation, but struck with the power of heavy battle mechs, or even assaults. But there was a drawback to this. The power plants necessary for these kinds of machines were very heavy, and very expensive. but also limited their heavy mech's overall offensive output, even if it was already quite intimidating. The 75-ton Night Gear, by contrast, dropped its engine size down to the formerly much more common 300XL power plant. This made it slower than the Timberwolf, or even the Gargoyle, a mech 5 tons heavier, but it gave the Night Gear a large volume of tonnage to use for other things. Most notably, it gave it the opportunity to be very heavily gunned, with it having a staggering 38 tons of free weight for weaponry and other secondary systems. Its slower speed, in other words, was meant to be made up for by an immense amount of firepower. Once Clan Novacat themselves received this design, or at least caught wind of it, either through trial or through trade, it became an inspiration for a project that was already under consideration. After the defeat at Tukiad, Khan Severin Leroux ordered the construction of a new heavy mech, one which was designed to protect the clan both militarily and spiritually. This battle mech would inevitably evolve into a true totem for the clan, and took on the title of Novacat, making it imbued with the very essence of those it was built to serve and defend. The creation process for this, however, was not quick and took years to reach fulfillment. A few key traits which this new Omnimech took from the Night Gear, beyond having some resemblance to the Jade Falcon-born Omnimech, was its movement profile, and how much tonnage could be left open for omnipods within a single heavy chassis. During the development of the mech itself, though, unthinkably enormous political changes took place within the Inner Sphere. First, the Novacats themselves began to improve relations with their Combine adversaries, while their bitterness to the Smoke Jaguars did not subside. This led to a strange occurrence where the Novacats more often raided their fellow clanners, rather than the Combine. But this was not the stellar disruption that changed everything. No, at least not in full. Clan aggression had unified the Inner Sphere powers against a common enemy. The lords of the 5 great Inner Sphere powers managed to set aside their differences, at least for the moment, to reforge what had been torn apart with the usurper Stefan Amaris' actions centuries prior, and rebuilt the Star League. This new Star League was viewed by the Novacats as fulfilling what the clans had always wanted, the restoration of what had been lost. Through trial, the cats themselves allowed to be claimed as Isorla by the Star League, before officially joining it. This, a short time later, then culminated in Operation Bulldog in the Inner Sphere, as well as Operation Serpent. Through visions, through negotiations, and through transformation in demeanor, almost humbling themselves for the greater good, and to fulfill what they believed the father of the clans would have wanted, Clan Novacat had switched sides, becoming protectors of the Inner Sphere in the most severe way. The Smoke Jaguars were caught entirely off guard by an army and armada they could have never imagined. Bled badly by the setbacks on Luthien, Walcott, and Tukiad, let alone the realities of being attrited down by insurgents, normal trials, raids, and covert actions, the Jaguars were a spent force. While on paper they were still in theory one of the strongest clans, a lack of experience by their new soldiers, an inability to adapt, arrogance, and new formations raised with questionable equipment all resulted in a toxic and unworkable defense against Bulldog in the Inner Sphere. Moving faster than their own timetables predicted, the Inner Sphere Novacats tore through the Jaguars, destroying their clan-armed opponents almost 2-1, and completely overwhelming them despite their opponents' best efforts. Bulldog then immediately departed to join Operation Serpent, to finish the job of annihilating Clan Smoke Jaguar in the clan homeworlds. Vicious fighting took place on Huntress, but the Jaguars were put down on their homeworlds, for the most part, before the Great Refusal was put into motion. The defenders of the Inner Sphere, the new Star League Defense Forces, would be put into a series of trials against the clans as a whole, on the clan homeworld of Stranamekti. By this time, the Novacats themselves had finished with the construction of their newest heavy Omnimech. First built on their Kerensky cluster capital of Barcella, The Novacat Battlemech became available in these heated battles in the homeworlds. Its other production site was their soon-to-be capital in the Inner Sphere, Irisi. To the Smoke Jaguars, this mech was a horrifying surprise to encounter, though they did manage to capture several examples of them, and employed them for their own embattled and doomed Tumen in the final battles the clan ever waged. The Novacat Battlemech was indeed present for the Great Refusal as well, and it was here that both Severin LaRue and Lucien Carnes, the Khans of Clan Novacat, made the ultimate sacrifice for the new Star League, and for the hope of peace and prosperity for mankind. Clan Novacat faced off against Clan Ice Hellion in the Great Refusal. The battle was vicious, the battle was hard, but in the end, the cats ruled the day. However, this is where Severin LaRue and Lucien Carnes were killed in action. Severin himself did kill Ice Hellion Khan Asa Taney just prior to being eliminated himself. With the conclusion of the trials as a whole, the Inner Sphere, the Star League, completed their victory. The clans were no longer to invade the Inner Sphere. Huntress became an outpost for the new Star League. And Clan Smoke Jaguar, the clan responsible for the invasion first and foremost, was annihilated. But there was a further price to be paid by Clan Novacat for their treason against the clans. A clan-heavy Omnimech weighing in at 70 tons, the Novacat is one of the most terrifying pocket assault mechs that can appear on the battlefield, regardless if its opponents are clan, Inner Sphere, or even Blakist in their nature. Built with the lessons of the clan invasion, and to represent its clan of origin as a true totem mech, this mighty Omnimech is a true wonder to behold. It can have the same impact on the battle, seemingly, as a platform 20 tons heavier, in the hands of a skilled pilot and a wise commander. In order to maximize its efficiency and tonnage, the Novacat utilizes a Minx-type endo-steel chassis, helping it save on weight, but at the cost of some critical spacing. Due to the era of its construction, the Novacat has a standard gyro and cockpit as its other core construction features. In regards to cooling, the Novacat's base chassis comes with 11 double heatsinks, letting it vent 22 heat per turn. To be clear, this is not exceptional in and of itself, but as it is an Omnimech, it can install heatsinks as needed, and it often very much is needed. Though, truthfully, this and every other aspect of the mech orbit around the one purpose for its design. As a heavy mech trying to punch much heavier than its weight, the Novacat needed to be heavily gunned, and thus, it needed a lot of pod space. Over 50% of the platform's overall weight is available for weaponry, a shocking 38 tons. In other words, this machine can, and will, bring the heat wherever it treads. In regards to its final core system, that being its onboard electronics, the Novacat comes with a JNE integrated communications package, and a Build 2 CAT TTS targeting and tracking system. Neither of these confer this big cat any bonuses, however. As for quirks in the advanced rules, the Novacat comes with the extended torso twist ability, though it also has the exposed actuators drawback. Mobility is life, especially in clan warfare, where mechs have a tendency, even in the heavy range, to move with grace and speed. However, the Novacat's traversal and profile more closely match a mech built for breakthrough formations. In the Inner Sphere, this speed and agility would be expected for a heavy mech in this tonnage bracket, but as a clan mech this just isn't the case. This means that the Novacat is in some ways plodding by clan standards, but while it may not be fast, it's not so slow as to be tactically useless. Powered by an 8-ton Consolidated Fusion 280 extra light fusion engine, the Novacat can achieve a maximum speed of 64 km per hour, or 6 movement points in the tabletop game. This means it can acquire a 2 TMM if it is forced to run in the open, though it can only acquire this by moving 5 hexes at a minimum. Where there are hills and forests, this cat is likely to try to hug terrain to increase its defensive bonuses in order to allow its own fire to be more effective, but also as to not be struck by ferocious counter batteries, as it will be a priority target in many cases for enemy mechs. Novacat pilots and commanders have to play smart in order to give their mech the best opportunity to be in a battlefield position to be successful. Because if enemies can catch this mech out in the open, and out of position, they will most definitely punish it, and rightly so. When a mech is extremely heavily gunned, it is very likely to attract fire. While this has been touched upon in the mobility section of the overview, it's important to stress here once more in the defense compartment, that this mech will in all likelihood be a priority target for enemy fire. This is the grim fate that any pocket assault will face. As a heavy mech, the Novacat is well guarded, but it is not as shielded from harm as an assault mech is. As a clan battle mech, it benefits from having an inbuilt K system, for any of its variants that come with ammunition or volatile components. This is minimally effective for most of its well-regarded and well-known configurations, however. Often being assembled with energy weaponry, the Novacat has a layer of durability when it comes in those configurations, simply by not having many volatile components on board that can damage or destroy the mech outright, should it be struck by an enemy attack at an inconvenient time. In regards to its hardened outer carapace's specifics, however, the Novacat has 13.5 tons of standard plating on board, giving it 216 points of armor. This is more than respectable for most mechs in this weight class, though one must remember, as I must reiterate, it is likely to be a beacon for incoming strikes. It can easily shirk off moderate fire with its relatively thick hide, but dedicated heavy fire will quickly deplete the Novacat's abilities on the battlefield. And as stated prior, it is likely to be target number 1 for the other side to want to disable or destroy. The configuration that is most preferred by the Science, Technician, and Warrior castes, and is the default setting that the Novacat can be found from throughout most of its existence, the Novacat Prime is a truly terrifying creature to behold. Why, may you ask? It's because it definitely embodies the Nova part of its name. First, to go over its non-weapons components. The cat then installs 14 double heatsinks, bringing its turn-on-turn cooling total up to 50 per turn. The mech is a freezer, but within that freezer lay the core of a burning hot star. This, as you have probably already surmised, is because of the nature of the primary weapon systems of this configuration. First, in the right arm, it has a pair of devastating clan ER-PPCs. These strike out at long distances, and can potentially head-clip targets. On top of that, they reliably tear through armor with the force of a Gauss rifle. They generate collectively 30 points of heat. In the left arm, it has 3 Clantech ER large lasers. These go even further than the particle cannons and hit for 10 damage each, allowing them to potentially tear the head off of an enemy mech, or at least have the chance to do so, though it's by no means a certainty. These lasers not only have a very long range, but also have excellent bracketing. They generate collectively 36 points of thermal buildup. Together, all of its energy weapons combined create a meltdown worth of heat. At 66 points. This outstrips its cooling capacity by 16, which automatically puts the pilot and mech in a difficult position. 2 rounds of alpha striking, indeed, will automatically shut the mech down, making the Novacat very sleepy as a design, much like real cats. This is not an oversight, though, as the real strength of the mech lay in bracketing its weapons fire to a situation. Alpha strikes are strong, and sometimes are needed, but the Novacat can reliably fire all 3 of its large lasers in a single PPC, and will only exceed its energy tolerance by 1. That is incredible. When managed well, the Prime can drop heavy damage, ripping into mechs and shredding armor off of targets, all while threatening enemy pilots' lives with instant death. And in desperate situations, The Novacat can unleash an alpha strike that will force its opponents into facing the full force of a star. There is a reason why this mech is a priority target that many enemies will attempt to remove from the table if given a chance. A long-range killer and a brutal armor breaker, the Novacat Prime is an exquisite fighting machine for 70 tons. Do you like to not overheat every time you alpha strike? Excellent! Do I have the battle mech for you? If anything, this mech not only resembles a freezer, but it runs as cool as one. Leaning into mobility and sustainability over raw firepower, the Novacat A is impressive, though it is not quite as heavily gunned as the Prime. The A installs 14 double heatsinks, letting it vent 50 heat every round once more. This is very impressive and is definitely required. Unlike the Prime, it is gunned much more appropriately for this total. 2 Clan ER large lasers are outfitted into each arm, giving it a total of 4 overall. With a threat range of 25 hexes and unlimited ammunition, this particular cat is quite the long-range hole puncher and sniper. As if that weren't enough, the A further enhances these lasers with a targeting computer, making them much more accurate and thus much deadlier. And this is especially true when it is engaging at long and medium ranges, its ideal hunting grounds. To further add to its lethal arsenal, it has 4 jump jets as well, letting the Novacat leap up to 120 meters, or 4 hexes in the tabletop game. Now, one may wonder, why does this add so much to the lethality? Well, it helps the Novacat avoid obstacles or reposition, and these normally would be a hindrance to firing. But this is partially mitigated by the targeting computer on board, making the mech deceptively more versatile, especially in close, or when maneuvering itself into a new defensible position. To summarize, this particular Novacat is more agile due to its jump jets. It is undergunned compared to the Prime, but almost perfectly synced to its heat profile. In other words, it has fantastic sustainable attacks, and it has the benefit of a targeting computer. This also gives the impression that it is not as huge of a threat in the immediacy on the battlefield, and has the potential of being overlooked compared to the Prime by its opponents, increasing its survivability, while it is in truth almost as deadly, if not more so. Death does indeed walk among us, and it does so in the form of one of the most terrifying heavy mech configurations ever devised. The Novacat B is the reason that the Archer 2C is entirely unnecessary. It is a complete horror show, and it is somehow more deadly and heavily armed than the Prime or any other variant that initially appeared in the late 3050s. Moving towards a missile configuration, this ammunition-fed monster is the manifestation of power overwhelming. Installing 5 extra double heatsinks to let this mech cool 32 per turn, the perfect amount for its payload, it is armed with 6 LRM-15 launchers, with 3 in each arm. This allows it to launch 90 LRMs every turn, and for a heavy battle mech, that is a truly horrifying amount of firepower to launch at an opponent, and it can do so indirectly, even. As a final backup, it has 2 ER medium lasers for if things get too close. But in truth, this is one of the deadliest heavy mechs to ever engage in combat, and it has a meaningful amount of ammunition for its sustainability as well. But all of this results in it very much being a target of priority for anyone with any degree of sense upon seeing it. It is truly a marvelous whirlwind of missile-based destruction. For any commander facing this, much like most Novacats, this is definitely something you'll want to remove from the table or cripple quickly. A combination of a ballistics machine and a pulse boat, this C is a unique build in its own right, aiming for accuracy and sustained scatter fire. To begin with, it has an extra double heatsink installed, but only one, letting it cool 24 every turn. Then it has 2 Clan large pulse lasers, which are deadly accurate and have extended ranges, all while hitting with significant force as well. These are both found in the mech's left arm. Backing these up, it has a pair of right arm mounted Ultra AC-5 autocannons, with 40 rounds of ammunition, which is more than respectable. These cannons will send out 5 damage strikes across the surface of a target, while the large pulse lasers will open the enemy up first. Adding a final ballistic system to this, it has an LB5X, once more in the right arm, to add shotgun scatter damage to the mech's overall profile. The primary drawback of the C is that the mech's main damage output is more limited, and it has 4 tons of ammunition, dwelling within its right torso more specifically, and this can result in fantastic fireworks displays should the mech be subject to intense pressure. But it is relatively cool running, has good range, and can deliver a variety of attacks on the clan's enemies where needed. It just doesn't quite hit with the force of some of its more famous stablemate designs. The last of the original configurations for the Battlemech, the Novacat D pivots once more to extreme heat production. It also does this by having a new technology, for the time, in the form of heavy lasers. To start with, it has 9 additional heat sinks installed, letting the mech dump 40 per turn, which is wholly inadequate to its payload overall. Why is this? Well, its primary weaponry is 3 heavy large lasers, with 2 in the right arm and 1 in the left. These collectively generate 54 points of heat, driving the mech immediately into a 14-point overage, provided it stands still. These are also not very accurate either, as their intense damage comes at a further price than just heat buildup. However, to offset their accuracy penalty, the D does have a targeting computer on board. Sadly, this isn't all though, for the Novacat D also comes with an LB-10 autocannon with 1 ton of ammunition, which can be found in the mech's left arm. The real problem with this? The mech can easily suffer from self-inflicted ammunition explosions due to heat. While in theory the LB-10 is a great scatter add-on to its arsenal, with its limited sinking ability, it feels like it could be adding a potential problem, rather than an asset. Most turns, it will fire 2 heavy large lasers and an LB-10X, which is fine, but this just feels undergunned and overexposed compared to the Prime, and compared to the A or even the B. It's a high-risk design, but where the payoffs are just to be slightly different, and yet somehow lesser than the Prime. I am not who I once was. Though I was born to the Kurita clan of the Draconis Combine and followed all its traditional paths, I have passed from that life and become a warrior of Clan Novacat. The path I now seek is wide enough for both the Novacats and the Combine to walk abreast in a universe of turmoil, where every hand is raised in menace. There can be brotherhood in unexpected places. You have seen a vision, but I do not ask that you recount it to me. Ponder the vision you have witnessed. Seek its meaning, and know that I, Warden of the Rights and Keeper of the Clan Reed, will aid you if you but ask. Ponder my words, and as the future unfolds, ask if they are not true. Oathmaster Kurita Minoru, August 21st, 3062. Victory for the Second Star League had its own steep and dangerous price for the clan that had embraced this restored human superstate. While the clans were forced to accept the Star League's victory and terms, they were not as forgiving to Clan Novacat for its transgressions. The Novacats still had enclaves in the Kerensky cluster, factories, and even their capital. This was about to change. They were abjured, and quickly became fair game, even if they were given 3 months to evacuate the homeworlds. Their new Khan, one Santon West, an accomplished officer as well as a hero from the disaster at Luthien, and a disciplined elemental Rystar prior to his ascension, was the one left with managing the fallout of the Great Refusal, both in the form of the departure of Clan Novacat from its holdings in the Kerensky cluster, as well as its new place in the Inner Sphere. By 3062, a mere 2 years after the Great Refusal, a massive transformation was now taking place within the clan as a result. They were orderly members of the new Star League, and were in the process of integrating their once conquered holdings in the Inner Sphere back into the Draconis Combine. The Irisi Prefecture became their home and base of operation, but it was not easy to be subjects to the dragon, as the dragon asked for much, and was always suspicious. Ironically, now with Clan Smoke Jaguar vanquished, and House Kurita largely restored, its gaze was much more dangerous than it had been, when it had a military force like the Smoke Jaguars baring its teeth at it. Clan Novacat and its Khan, as a consequence, now had to walk a delicate path, one which took care of its own people and warriors, showing their independence and respecting their own unique ways, and while still appeasing their new masters on Luthien. Throughout this difficult process, thankfully, there was Kurita Minoru, who cast aside his life of privilege, living as the youngest son of Kurita Theodore, now coordinator of the Draconis Combine, and opting to join Clan Novacat, something he did for his own spiritual journey. From here, he joined in the Oathmaster's Grand Melee. The son of Theodore had become a clan warrior, and shortly after, an Oathmaster of the clan. Acceptance of him in this role was difficult, as despite his skill and personal desires, all things were always viewed with a political lens. But his demeanor and behavior proved true, with him being a Novacat first, with him even viewing his prior life as something that had faded into the past, with a new life ahead of him. But to many within the clan, and outside of it, Minoru's rise was viewed as a leash placed around the cat's neck, whether true or not. What I mean is that in safeguarding the Combine, in tying Novacat to us, we have tied ourselves to the Novacats. Minoru Kurita is no more. In his place stands Minoru Novacat. I was granted permission to attend the Forum of Law after you left Yamarovka, and I witnessed his recitations and commentaries. It was clear to me that he was no longer the son of the Coordinator. The Combine has won the aid of the Novacats, but in doing so, we have allowed the offspring of the dragon himself to be perverted beyond recognition. How can I be happy about such as that? Yoshio Palmer, September 1st, 3062. The dragon and the cat were further bound together, and there still was indeed conflict for this new alliance to contend with. Alshane, a former, major Combine world now held by the newly formed Ghostbear Dominion, fell under assault by the Alshane Avengers, a disciplined, veteran formation of soldiers who had lost their home during the clan invasion. Quietly, the Novacats had attempted to warn their allies of this, but it all came too late. War exploded along the border in 3062, and as the fires of conflict began to rage, the dragon raised its war banners, calling its warlords to the field, including the Novacats, who would now have their opportunity to display the full fury of their new totem Battletech. The fighting in the war was ferocious for both sides, though unfortunately the Combine was not ready for it in the aftermath of its vicious war with the Smoke Jaguars. When the Avengers had marched on their home, getting killed in the process, it doomed House Kurita to a war that it could not win. The cats themselves played a key role in halting at least one renegade DCMS unit during the debacle as well, which would have only further thrown fuel on the fire. Their clusters throughout the war, in the desperate clash of powers, fought alongside their freebirth counterparts, sword to sword and back to back. The end of the conflict, after a series of trials, resulted in victory overall for the Ghostbear Dominion, but the Novacats had satisfied their honor in all of it, while also sacrificing their blood and machines for their new allies in a display of loyalty and shared sacrifice. The Novacat itself became a much prized mech in all of the fighting, being captured by the Ghost Bears when possible, but the latter was also traded for as well. This popularity with the Dominion, though, would not last forever. This heavy Omnimech proved it had teeth, though, and not only in this conflict, but in the St. Ives War with the Capellan Confederation, where the Novacats had been deployed as peacemakers, fighting against Sun Tzu's insidious plot to regain control of a wayward province. Despite their best efforts, much like in the Combine Dominion War, the outcome here, too, could not be changed by the Cats, or their mighty battle mechs. This did represent, however, the furthest any clan had penetrated into the Inner Sphere up until this point. Sadly, the bloodshed across the Inner Sphere was not to be quieted. Pitifully, it was to accelerate over the coming years. The Federated Commonwealth was torn asunder, the entire Inner Sphere and its new Star League, shortly thereafter, fell apart as well. The very thing Novacat had defected to support, the very purpose they had given themselves, becoming a part of the Dragon in order to fulfill the promise of the clans and their founders, vanished. And it was replaced only with intense violence and destruction. Only once the word of Blake and their crusade were put to an end did peace have a chance, with the arrival and rise of a new status quo, and a republic at the heart of the Inner Sphere. First designed as a configuration in 3062, the Novacat M is a devastating war machine, but a massive departure from most Novacats. At its core, it is a ballistics machine, and one that can and will deliver hammer blows that few mechs can resist. Potentially equipped with a variety of munition types as well, it is truthfully just a faster, more dangerous, lighter King Crab, more than anything else. Purely a weapons platform, it has no new equipment to speak of other than guns, guns, guns. So what's the main course, you may ask? Why, it's a pair of LB-20X autocannons, with one in each arm. 4 tons of ammunition is then stored on board with 2 tons per side torso, and, without alterations, it has a mixture of cluster and solid ammunition types. What does this mean? For 1 or 2 rounds of fire, these heavy guns will blast their way through targets' outer layers, before switching over to scatter damage, blasting its victims with shotgun blasts that will cover the entirety of an enemy mech in its journey to crit-fish them to death. Now, if this were all it had, that'd be ruthless enough, but it further backs these up with a pair of SRM-6 streaks in the left torso, adding more heavy scatter damage strikes, before in the right torso, it has an accurate, long-range weapon in the form of a large pulse laser. The latter is used as a backup system, or to begin slicing through armor on targets at longer ranges. Before limitations placed on it needing available munitions to fight, the Novacat M is a brutal close-range monster, and one you should never overlook. If you heard that one of these is coming for you, and assume that it's a sniper, think again, and you should begin to worry once it closes to its ideal short-range killing field. The year 3064 became a bit deadlier for anyone who dwelled within it, the moment the ATM-bearing Novacat E came online. Built in the aftermath of the Dominion Combine War, using new clan weapons technologies, this Omnipod variant is very unique, and is still a very much lethal take on the Cat and its available space. In order to accommodate its onboard payload, its cooling system is upgraded to vent 30 heat per turn, and this is not done to make way for energy weaponry, but for missiles. Because in its right arm it has 2 ATM-9 launchers, and in the left, another set of 2 ATM-9 launchers. with a total of 8 tons of ammunition backing these up, with missiles of all sorts in the standard configuration. These systems are a brutal sledgehammer that will break their opponents open. ER missiles hit at long range, standard missiles shred targets in the medium bracket, and HE missiles, anything that gets close to these things will be obliterated by the kind of firepower that these will throw out. To back these up and hole punch, it once more has a large pulse laser. Overall, the E is an extremely effective fighter, but it is a big enough threat, like most Novacats, it has to be concerned with surviving to use those weapons effectively. Still, if this thing closes and is armed with HE missiles, woe betide any mech in its path, as it unleashes the potential for over 100 damage in a single volley. Did you want friends? No? Then this is the Battlemech for you. Truly a tyrant on the battlefield, introduced in 3070, just as the Blakists were beginning their campaign of terror. The real terror of the Inner Sphere took shape in the form of the Novacat F. Much respect to anyone who pilots a mech against this thing, as it is the embodiment of clan accuracy, and will drive even the coolest tempered Mechwarriors and commanders into a fit of fury for having come against it. Why? Because, my friends, what if I told you it had a targeting computer, ECM suite, jump jets, and all of its primary armaments were pulse lasers. With a heat threshold of 28, it can alpha strike its 2 right arm large pulse lasers and 3 left arm mounted medium pulse lasers, and only incur minor issues for 1 turn. This beast wants to snipe its targets while masking its presence before repositioning. Anyone who gets too close will be hosed down in a wave of clan pulse fire. It has no ammunition to exploit to make it explode early, and it has no meaningful hard counter against it, beyond overwhelming it with numbers or trying to outshoot it at range with heavier weaponry. The Novacat F is a truly insidious creation as a result. And to think, all of this for a mech with basically the battle value of a Timberwolf Prime. Pretty awesome. Another product of the Blakist era, the Novacat G is yet another nightmare made manifest for almost anything that could encounter it. Resembling the Inner Sphere Salamander, it is almost a perfect combination for crashing into Desgra Inner Sphere forces, and providing indirect missile support, or even just direct punishing fire. To begin with, it has a targeting computer, as one does if they want to make the Inner Sphere suffer, and it can drop 28 thermals per turn once again. It also repeats the same beats by having an ECM suite, helping protect it with an invisible layer of electronic defense. Let's start going over it being an absolutely horrendous thing for infantry to deal with, as it has 8 AP Gauss rifles on board, with 4 per side torso, but with only 1 ton of ammunition. While it may not have much staying power, few formations will survive very long in its presence regardless. In other words, these are great at picking off light targets nearby, or harassing heavier ones if needed. Next up, it's got an ER large laser for long-range hole punching. A very adequate weapon, to be sure. But the real threat is simple. It has 2 right-arm mounted LRM-20 launchers with Artemis 4 fire control system, and 1 left-arm mounted LRM-20 with the same upgrade, letting it unleash 60 LRMs per turn. It has 5 tons of ammunition on board for these systems too, making them fairly well fed, meaning that the missile barrage won't end prematurely when it needs to bring the rain. That's a lot of missiles. That's a lot of damage. And this mech can even do this from the safety of cover if needed. A truly dangerous predator on any battlefield. The brutality and swiftness in which both sides wage the war has made piecing together an accurate picture difficult, especially when involving the generally secretive Combine. Dr. Eli Hanover, Professor of Military History, University of Procyon, 3135. Turmoil followed in the wake of the creation of the Republic of the Sphere, after the decline and collapse of the Word of Blake. The Novacats had transitioned to being an inner sphere power, albeit one connected to the Draconis Combine, and they had bolstered their ranks with superb war machines. But none would truly surpass the Novacat Omnimech in terms of its recognition as the mech to represent the clan. On top of that, its distribution had widened across the inner sphere, mostly through trade to other clans. Still, for those that manufactured this behemoth of a battle mech, the political landscape was beginning to shift under their feet, as the Draconis Combine and Rosselhig Dominion saw their relations perpetually decline, and as an air of toxicity from old, scornful DCMS officers, still bitter about the loss of Alshane and the loss of the First Combine Dominion War, turned their attention once more to Clan Ghostbear, but they also showed a growing undercurrent of disdain for their Novacat allies. Cross-border raids had been sanctioned by both nations, resulting in an unofficial, fierce competition between Clan Ghostbear and its DCMS rivals. This undeclared, low-level war accelerated despite the two major parties being functional allies only a few years prior, fighting against the Blakist menace in unison. All of this discord created opportunities for Clan Novacat, ironically. The Novacats had lost a significant portion of their tumen to the Republic of the Sphere after its formation, with Alpha, Delta, and Tau galaxies all declaring themselves for the Republic. Both the Coordinator and Con West agreed and allowed their peaceful departure. These warriors, those that left for this restored hegemony, all believed in Devil and Stone and believed in the Republic, and sought to nurture this new, unique state at the heart of the inner sphere. Regardless of the reason, the reality was that this had left Clan Novacat in a desperate strait. They went from having 27 battle clusters to a mere 13, and those that remained were not even their best soldiers, as Alpha, Delta, and Tau were some of their best galaxies at the time. What this all meant was that often the Novacats chose to participate in raiding the Dominion, using their limited strikes as a quick way to blood their new warriors. The materials acquired from these raids were then used to build up their prefecture, allowing for greater industrial output, or taking their military gains for equipping new units within the tumen. Essentially, more Novacats and various other battle mechs could walk off the assembly line, off the backs of hard-working Dominion citizens, and their dead warriors. Without diplomacy between the two clans, as the Draconis Combine was responsible for international interactions between states, the hostility of this situation reached a boiling point. One of the last straws was on Hail Swoen, in November of 3096, where the Novacat Rangers pinned 2 Dominion stars from the 3rd Bear's Guards into a box canyon. Realizing they had no option but to surrender, the Guards asked for Hegira, functionally honorable surrender. The Novacats, under Star Captain Eli Rossi, responded by ordering the massacre of the pinned Mechwarriors, in order to optimize their salvage opportunities for Clan Novacat. This set the tone for what was to follow. Assisted by loyalists on the other side of the Draconis Combine, in the form of the Black Dragon Society and units supporting them, a location was revealed to the Ghost Bears as to where Con West would be. All of the actors were in place now, and a tragedy was set to unfold for all those involved. For those betraying the Novacats within the Combine, they viewed them as an alien culture that had infiltrated their beloved nation, and considered them no better than the threat from without. They also sought for the Combine to return to its traditional aggressive ways. Con Kerensky of Clan Ghostbear, with this new intelligence, ordered the 8th Bear Cuirassiers across the border to strike at Yamarovka, where Con West was investigating a Sibco facility. The attack made landfall on September 14th, 3098. Star Colonel Maya de Villiar of the 8th had one goal when they landed: to entirely annihilate all Novicat forces, and ensure the death of Con West. No bids were made. This was not a battle with honor. It was a fight to now murder their bitter rivals. The clash was violent as the Novicat enclave was surrounded. A 2-hour exchange emerged as the Novicats were entirely boxed in, save for the arrival of the Cat's Eye Cluster and Nkoru Kishik. Knowing that they were out of position, with their options running thin, the Ghost Bears opted to achieve their mission over survival and surrender, and charged the Novicats enclave, killing Con West as they did, before desperately moving to pull back. By contrast, the defenders were so stunned by this brazen act of tactical malfeasance, and how it had been so successful, that some of the bears even managed to slip away, getting to their dust-off site for extraction. Relations between the Dominion and Combine were now beyond icy, but both sides' civilians' governments attempted to calm the situation between the two clans and states. But this was never to be. Con Ajax Drummond was elected as leader of the clan, being promoted from his prior position as Sakon. He was a cunning strategist and was very sharp in his intellectual faculties. Ironically, Drummond, when he was Sakon, was the one responsible for putting the Novicats into this dire circumstance to begin with, as it was his orders, not West's, that had informed the raiding Novicats to ignore Hegira requests, which had then led to the massacre that set the entire events of what was to come in motion. As the two states tried, at least on the surface, to ease tensions, he used this lull in the fighting to gather Clan Novicat's forces. From Shadowcats to Elementals to the mighty Novicat itself, their forces began to muster. These mechs and munitions were husbanded, because the war was only about to truly begin. Ajax traveled to Luthien, where he met privately with Kurita Hohiro, the coordinator of the Combine. A deal was struck. Logistics support from the Greater Combine would be asked for, in exchange for the Novicats providing the Combine with increased volumes of clan equipment, over a set course of time, after the hostilities were resolved, of course. Restoring their industrial base, now guaranteed support from the head of the dragon, and with the Combine moving its own forces to now protect the Irisi prefect, in order to ensure their valuable clan vassal could provide them with the weaponry promised. By the end of October 1398, things were once more set to explode. Only this time, the power of the conflagration greatly eclipsed what had come before. It is the position of the Novicats to think of ourselves as honored guests in the home of the dragon. As such, we honor our hosts by dealing with issues outside of the Combine cities and away from your innocents' homes. However, we do feel a certain guilt that our misguided brethren may not honor this arrangement. Excerpt from the IPN exclusive interview series with Con Ajax Drummond of Clan Novicat, 20th of October, 1398. One more important thing to note is that the Novicats and Ghost Bears had very different arsenals at their disposal. The clan invasion had been 50 years prior, and both clans had become increasingly dependent on their own domestically manufactured battle mechs. For the Cats, the Novicat was a key piece of military equipment, clearly. They had few other truly heavy hitters that could lay down the kind of firepower this iconic heavy mech could. With limited numbers of domestically produced assault mechs, or pocket assaults to draw from, while there were noteworthy killers like the second-line Supernova in their arsenal, and trade with Clan Diamond Shark or salvage from Clan Ghost Bear could fill gaps in their lineup. The mech which shared their clan's name was consistently their best weapon to deal with the heavier, and to be blunt, superior military forces of the Ghost Bear Dominion. Whether during the precursory raids before the war proper began, or after the bloodshed was unleashed, the Novicat Omnimech was clearly a capable and vital piece of the clan's arsenal. The quiet before the storm came to a close when Clan Novicat, on November 29th, 1398, launched a dedicated assault on Soverzine, tearing into the planet's defenders, in the form of the 3rd Hussars, a Kung's army cluster, They stripped down as much of the planet's military supplies as they could. Heavy fighting for the planet's spaceport did result in high casualties for the Cats, though these losses were theoretically offset by the overabundance of materials they were able to retrieve. Unfortunately for the Nova Cats, however, the Ghost Bears had been planning and preparing themselves, and launched a much more robust effort in the form of Operation Nightfall. The Bears struck Mulang with ferocity. As their defenders, the Nova Cat Hussars, had taken part in the assault on Sovereign Zine. They massacred the planet Sibcos and destroyed its supply dumps. During the bloodbath on the ground, the Hussars did arrive in system, and made their own landing on the world they were responsible for, only to face the wrath of the 8th Cuirassiers. This landing was opposed by the Bears, and the unit was shredded by the Rosselhagian claws immediately, with only a few in number managing to survive landfall. By the end of January, even as support had arrived, the remnants of the Hussars were scraped off planet by the Nikuru Kishik, who had come only to rescue what survivors they could. Labria came next, with an assault landing from the 4th Bear Regulars and 1st Dracon, once more during January. In this instance, the fighting was beyond brutal. The battle for the planet only lasted a few weeks, with the Dracons razing several Novacat settlements, before murdering the planet's Sibcos and then proceeding to take over the genetic repositories. In the planet's defense, the Novacats did destroy many of their opponents, but it was of little consequence to the outcome. Yamarovka felt the wrath of the Ghost Bears once more as well. By February, the Bears made their play for this beleaguered Novacat world, though the Cats had more of a chance to prepare in this instance. The new Sakon of the clan, Paul LaRue, was also present and in command of the forces on world. Yamarovka was indeed next in the Bears' path, and they did have the advantage in manpower and materials even here, but the Cats managed to cling on, at least long enough to evacuate their Sibcos and civilians, who thus far had faced reprisals and violence from the Ghost Bear Tumen. The defenders forced their opponents to pay a heavy price before their inevitable withdrawal in the face of their enemy's superiority in the battle space. Combine troops moved into the war zone, but were unfortunately mixed with Black Dragon supporters, which would only be all the more harrowing for the people of the Irisi prefecture. Almost silently, these troops did exactly as the Ghost Bears had, attempting to kill Novacat civilians and Sibcos, or even exaggerating the violence done by the Ghost Bears through their own quiet support. This was a stab in the back, as these renegades did their best to weaken, and then cut down the clan they invited into their mix, all while trying to bleed the Ghost Bears as well. Clan Ghost Bear had won the strategic initiative up until this point, but the Dragon and the Cat had unified much of their response, at least officially. The war entered a devastating new phase. The bloody campaign on Itabania unfolded before Oresti, Jarrett, Thule, Asgard, Karaper, Mainland, Labria, and Sternward took place. Losses were high on both sides, but the Bears seemed to weather the storm, and often deliberately targeted civilians, despite the slanted Republic of the Sphere report after hostilities had come to a close. The Bears had been out for blood. 3 key battles took place that permanently changed the fate of the conflict. The space battle for Bikini Atoll saw the Dominion use its warship assets against the fleet of the Novacats. 2 factory ships were destroyed, along with the warship Amber Lotus. In early 3100, the Battle of Trondheim unfolded. It was the Dragon, not the Novacats themselves, that struck back this time, hitting their enemies in a place they'd have never expected, especially with the defenders of the Combine being forced onto the back foot in the Irisi province. Repaying the Ghost Bears for their victory at Atoll, the Combine destroyed the warship Ursus Major, a Night Lord-class battleship, while another major warship, the Lair of Mighty Worms, had escaped. Its systems were badly damaged, and the vessel was scuttled after it had slipped away. The greatest battle of the campaign, though, was the Battle of Irisi itself, where the Ghost Bears deployed 2 full galaxies to put the Novacats down for good. This was done with the intent of completely destroying the other clan. Beta and Omega galaxies were the ones leading this fight. The Defenders, a combination of the depleted Novicat units representing half of the remaining Tumen, were given the order by their Khan of not one step back, letting them know that there was nowhere left to retreat. This was their greatest bastion, capital, and true final refuge. Losses from the conflict, and the death of so many Sibcos at the claws of the Ghost Bears, had left the Novicat aerospace forces as a shell of their former selves, with almost no replacements in sight. They could barely oppose any form of landing the Ghost Bears intended to make, and this ended up being the case. This was a war that was going to be settled on the ground. The fighting was intense right away, as the two forces clashed, with the Ghost Bears pointing their deadly force straight at the capital city to destroy all remaining Sibcos, as well as to destroy the primary Novicat repositories. Factories, cities, and the countryside all became battlefields. The intensity of the fighting was dire, to say the least. Much of the planet's industrial base was devastated in bombardments launched by mechs and aerospace fighter raids. Con Drummond was nearly killed when an entire building collapsed upon his mech, but he was found alive, inside of his Novicat, no less. The Bears paid a price for this fight, though, taking heavy losses in New Barkala, but they gutted the Novicat's industries, and even nearly destroyed their genetic repositories. The death toll amongst the Defenders, too, was catastrophic. While there were still several operations against the Dominion by the joint Novicat DCMS forces, Irisi had broken the cat's back, only because of their outrageous behavior and the violence towards the Novicats, where the Ghost Bears ironically stopped, when their leadership was functionally overthrown by civilians inside of the Dominion over their behavior, as mass protests broke out over the Bears' obvious attempt to annihilate their enemies in ways the people of Rosselhague very much did not support and did not agree with. With the politics playing out on both sides, peace managed to be secured. The war ended in November of 3101, but there was a grim reality for the Novicats. The cats had been torn asunder, both industrially and in terms of their people. And worse yet, those that remained in this maimed clan lived only to discover that their very allies had traitors from within, who had participated in the slaughter of the Novicats, just as much as the Ghost Bears had. Their home, once secure and safe, was now in jeopardy at all times. It was to become in truth a prison, and one where the Novicat citizens within began to show increasingly open scorn for their Novicat neighbors for the misfortune and misery they had brought with them. But their problems were more than just that. The Novicat Tumen and their designs were found wanting. It's more than fitting that the Novicat itself was the mech piloted by Con Drummond, who had led the clan to such a disastrous state. It was unfortunately not able to contend with the full might of the Ghost Bear's Tumen. But it shielded the Khan, and what was left of his warriors, but it simply could not reach out and grasp victory. 40 years after it had first debuted, the Novicat, and the clan that forged it, had lost much of the power and wonder that they had arrived in the Inner Sphere with. Those who were mystics and magnificent warriors were now depleted, without true friends, and without a means of fully recovering. They were no longer seemingly a force of nature, but a pet kept in a cage of a mighty dragon that now loomed over the clan itself. Little did the Novicats know, this set the stage for their finale in the Inner Sphere. It was to be the closing act, once more linked to their visions. A final act of mysticism, vision, and honor. Developed during the Second Combine Dominion War in 3099, the Novicat H incorporates several advanced technologies that prior models did not have access to. and very much alters several key attributes of the Novacat as a whole. In terms of the mech's non-weaponry based functions, it installs additional heatsinks as usual, this time boosting its ability to moderate its temperature to 38 points a turn. Next, it installs 3 coolant pods, giving the mech the ability to provide short-term boosts to the cooling functionality with the spending of each of these pods. This can only be done 3 turns, however, but each time it is used it will make a massive difference. To complete this picture, it has a supercharger, letting this behemoth rush across the battlefield as though it was another clan fast heavy, at least for short periods of time. This feature does, however, run the risk of potentially damaging the mech's engine, should it be used too often, or should the pilot be unlucky. The main benefit, beyond simply the fact that it moves faster, it gives the cat more tactical options on the battlefield. Looking over its weaponry, it has a very simple loadout. It's got a medium pulse laser on the right torso as an accurate backup weapon for its main arm-mounted systems, to start with. In the right arm, it has an LB-20X autocannon with 4 tons of ammunition, giving it heavy punching and cluster firing options. Up next, in the left arm, it has a pair of improved heavy large lasers. These are extremely powerful lenses that can deliver hellish damage, and can head clip just like the LB-20's solid rounds can. These also don't suffer the same accuracy penalty as a regular heavy large laser. There is a trade-off for this though, in that they are volatile, if they are hit by enemy fire, but that is a small price to pay to avoid accuracy issues. Still, these pair well with the LB-20, either in delivering hellish solid strikes altogether, for over 50 damage combined, or for punching holes in targets, before scattershotting them with LB cluster rounds. The mech is entirely built around this combo, and exploiting it to the fullest by using its coolant pods at the most opportune time to drop hellish alpha strikes. It is a very powerful variant of the machine. It will run down and rip apart its opponents, though I'm sure it will be a priority target on the battlefield. I have seen the end, Horus. For us, it will all end in fire. But though we go to our deaths, we need not perish weakened by fear. If only you motivate us. Star Commander Pardis, Arisi, New Barkala, 30th of December, 3142. The Inner Sphere had been relatively peaceful, outside of several regions of conflicts, once known for its human space-spanning wars, great storms of chaos that sucked every major and minor power into it, and a region that seemingly fed on misery and death like a hurricane does warm water. The arrival of the Republic seemed to finally create some peace, at least of sorts. Jump ships leaped between regions with trade goods. People were born and died on most worlds, unworried of battlemech deployments or nuclear strikes. And the horrors of the past, while still in living memory, were gradually beginning to fade. But things were hardly still in this time, even if things seemed too slow. On the front of weapons development, in general, most powers had atrophied, and especially Clan Novacat. Following the Second Combine Dominion War, the Cats had struggled to rebuild, even in terms of their damaged facilities. Indeed, the Novacats had almost no new designs, instead relying on aging staples, like the mech that was their totem. But even the mighty Novacat was beginning to show its age, as new technologies, built directly into the chassis of new mechs, started to spread. By 3122, it was no longer quite the best the clan had to offer either, as it was put into competition with new models that were finally beginning to walk off the assembly lines in the Irisi prefecture. Mechs like the Cave Lion were to be the future of the clan, built despite the difficulties they'd faced, especially given that the dragon had all but starved them of resources in the wake of the failure and discord the clan had brought to the Combine. Still, even diminished in the eyes of some, the Novacat was far from an obsolete design, and was prized by those who still had the honor of piloting it. This all tied into one key grim reality, though. The Cats had felt the betrayal of House Kurita from the moment they had lost the Second Combine Dominion War. So weakened was the clan in the aftermath, as well as having made so many enemies within their new home. They were placed into cultural preservation districts. Resentment at being treated so callously by their obvious masters led to something catastrophic, as these feelings manifested into a rebellious movement within the clan's warrior caste. In essence, it was those that would either see Clan Novacat restored to its former glory and rightful place, perhaps as the masters in their supposed partnership with the dragon, or to separate from the Draconis Combine in its entirety, to free themselves. They would not allow for the continuation of the demeaning servitude that they had been placed in. Through the sight of history, it is clear it was the election of Khan Jakali Nostra in 3120 that sealed Clan Novacat's fate. Nostra was a proud woman, and one shaped and forged by the very conflict which had diminished her clan so greatly. She represented the viewpoint that the Novacats should be free of the control of House Kurita, and would take her first reasonable chance to make that a reality. If it wasn't possible, she would see the cat at least restored, as others wanted as well. With her at the helm, even if all of the rank-and-file warriors did not fully agree with this necessarily, it ensured that the more radical viewpoints developed over the decades of humiliation were to be represented in how the clan operated, and the actions it took. Her greatest achievement in the years after her ascension was negotiating with the Draconis Combine to rebuild much of the shattered Tumen during the late 3120s and 3130s, though to levels far below the peak strength that Novacat had possessed in the past. This still further entrenched her support, giving her the credibility needed to take the clan in whatever direction her vision saw. That opportunity began to knock when the dragon was shaken to its very core in the aftermath of the HPG blackout of 3132. This event, Grey Monday, impacted the entirety of logistics and communications across the Inner Sphere, and worse, spawned the conditions for political and economic havoc. Wars began to break out inside of the Republic of the Sphere as dissidents and the disaffected took up arms against the central government, before the great houses nearby, but especially the Capellan Confederation, began to march on the embattled state. Shortly afterwards, the Combine started to make moves itself. In this action, the retaking of lost worlds from the Republic of the Sphere, the Novacats pounced at the opportunity for combat, to blood their units effectively, and to build their own prestige and credibility once more. They helped in the liberation of the Dairon military district, gaining them allies in the form of local Combine soldiers they had fought alongside, as well as one warlord Katana Tormark. The next domino to fall in place was in 3136, when the entire royal family of the Combine were eliminated in a series of swift and brutal events. Kurita Vincent had been considered a weak leader by some, including by the rising warlord Toranaga Matsuhari. He was eliminated, along with all of his remaining family, by the vicious warlord through subterfuge and assassination. Only his daughter, Kurita Emi, escaped, and in secret. And this was the vector that the Novacats intended to take to their ultimate goal, either in the form of liberation or power. Clan Novacat conspired to keep Emi safe until the time was right. The Gunji no Kanri, Toranaga, and his puppet coordinator, Kurita Yori, were to be their enemies in due time, with their soldiers somewhat occupying the now liberated regions of the Republic. Gathering their strength and waiting for the right moment, the Novacats were poised to strike the instant weakness displayed itself. They incorrectly assumed what that weakness would look like in the core of House Kurita, due to the invasion of the Draconis March. by the Kanri. It's important to note that Toranaga Matsuhari was truthfully the military mind of a lifetime in terms of his skills as a commander. Despised by some, but embraced by many others, the successful leader of the coup against House Kurita was an incredibly capable and competent combatant. This reality is undeniable, and unfortunately for Clan Novacat, they did not foresee just who they had crossed. Toranaga always tended to keep a major force in reserve for his military operations, using these troops and assets to either shore up a losing battle, or to sweep his opponents when the time was right. Unfortunately for Kurita Emi, and the entirety of Clan Novacat, they did not take this into account when the Kanri's play for the border regions of the Federated Sun stalled. Sensing vulnerability, sensing the time to strike was at hand, in 3141, when Duke Corwin Sandoval launched a massive counteroffensive across the recently occupied Draconis Reach. The Cats took action. The now apparently embattled DCMS and their mercenary allies were distracted in the eyes of Clan Novacat. The rebellion began openly on the 16th of June, 3141, with the Novacats openly declaring Kurita Emi the true coordinator, and announcing their intention to place her upon the throne of Luthien. The opening of this act, however, was the slaughter of the Irisi DCMS garrison by the Novacats. So long had they grown to resent the forces that repressed them, that this came to a head in the worst way, with the slaughter of anyone who stood in their path, and this was done in the form of deliberate, unsanctioned executions. The leadership of Clan Novacat had lost control of their warriors in the first moments of their betrayal, and while there were accounts to be made over the issue, this set the tone for what was to come. An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth, it would seem, was now how the war would be waged. Immediately after liberating Irisi Prefecture, the Cats liberated the very friendly Dairon Military District, a region they had played a key role in ripping away from the Republic of the Sphere only a handful of years prior. They'd caught the dragon sleeping in all of this, and thus faced minimal resistance as they swept through the area where they already had several garrison galaxies stationed. Warlord Katana, an ally of the Cats, then openly joined the rebellion during this campaign, causing a major concern for the embattled Toranaga, at least in theory. Her open revolt undercut part of the DCMS's plan to hold this growing problem in check, but ultimately this just extended out the doomed venture. Tormark had many enemies within the DCMS herself, and pledging her allegiance to the rebellion made it even more unpopular with many of the powerful within the Combine. Powerful people which the rebellion needed if it was to be successful. As if things couldn't get worse, Clan Novacat and its allies had assumed that the full might of the dragon had been directed towards the Davians already. This was simply not the case. Large formations of soldiers were in staging areas, set to be unleashed into the Draconis marches, to land a devastating counterblow on the march they faced. Instead, these vast armies were now redirected in short order to deal with the growing rebellion which had risen against the new coordinator and her Kanri. The Novacats seemed to expect a greater uprising to support them as well, but instead they found Toranaga's regime to be far more resilient than originally anticipated. More brutally, perhaps it was the fact that the Novacats were clearly the ones behind this political upheaval, and such disdain and anger had grown between the elites and general public within the Combine towards their guests, the Novacats, that they were willing to ignore any missteps by the tyrant and master strategist who embroiled the Combine in a war with the Federated Suns. This doomed any further uprisings in support of Emi and her son as well, showing them as self-interested traitors, willing to work with outsiders who wanted to disrupt the Combine. Either way, the entire situation began to unravel as Toranaga turned his full attention towards crushing those who stood against him. The Novacats' offensive came to a halt as they and their allies were met with overwhelming levels of force in 3142. They'd operated with few obstacles prior to this, but now, the campaign was thrown into desperation as the best troops in the DCMS descended upon them. The mustered soldiery tore into Tormak's forces first, knowing they were the weakest link in the insurgency that they now faced. This left the Novacats exposed, and forced their troops into relocating to defend their core regions. Now, with the situation deteriorating, however, they pivoted to make an assault on Luthien, to finish the battle they had started almost a century earlier. The problem for Con Nostra was, even as she embarked on this new operation, was that many of the Novacats that had been ordered to relocate found themselves delayed, or interdicted outright by the Conri. Organizing her forces, Con Nostra prepared for what looked like a doomed march on the Draconis Combine's capital. In terms of combat materials and how this disaster had unfolded, there had been major shifts for the Dragon in the quality of their mech forces. When the Novacats had first struggled against the Combine, they were battling against overburdened forces reliant on primitive battle mechs and arrayed in poor positions. By the time of the Dark Age, the DCMS was truly a fierce competitor, even to the clans. Not only did they possess many Clan Tech battle mechs due to trade with Clan Seafox, as well as with, ironically, Clan Novacat, but they also had a massive inventory of hard-hitting battle mechs using the best technologies the Inner Sphere could develop internally up until this point. They also, doctrinally, knew how to use these machines to maximum effect. What this meant was that Novacat battle mechs, like their staple icon the Novacat, were not as effective as they once were, fighting hordes of ill-equipped Inner Sphere soldiers. Instead it, and the Mechwarriors within it, whether in the disastrous withdrawal to the Irisi prefecture, or in what was to come, found themselves outnumbered by competent machines, being used well by capable commanders, who would slowly grind the clan and its war machines into the dirt, before coming in for the killing blow. Alpha Galaxy was stationed on Irisi itself, and was to be the spearhead for the Novacats' final throw of the dice against the Dragon. But it was already too late. Due to the HPG blackout, unknowingly, Con Nostra's forces on Lyston, Avon, and Cyanica had already been annihilated, and her capital was already isolated. The Novacats discovered this only when Combine ships entered the Irisi system and began broadcasting images of their fallen comrades. The Cats were shown a vision of their own future by the Gunji no Kanri, ironically. The defenders of Irisi now understood just how hopeless their struggle had become, but they were warriors first, and political freedom fighters second. They prepared themselves for the final clash, for the final stand of Clan Novacat. Those of low stature, without blood names, were even given key positions in the remains of the army, as they were called into officers' positions as required for the defense. Warriors! Many among the lower castes mark today as a day of gifts, and that is certainly the case for us. We have been given the gift of a glorious battle, the likes of which few of us will have ever seen. Some of us have been given the gift of warrior status. I have been given the gift of you, for I shall lead you into battle and to victory. I know there have been doomsayers prowling the fringes of our camps, like specters in the night. They say our clan will soon be in an end. I say they are wrong. I say we will stand victorious. And in victory, there is life. Star Captain Horuz, Irisi, New Barkala, 25th of December, 3142. The final battle that unfolded is perhaps the Novacats' finest moment, standing for their principles and clinging to life with a desperation only seen by dying men. Their lives, their bloodhouses, the very remembrances and stories that carried their people's legacies were all at stake. Even if none would hear songs of how they fought, they aimed to let their final roar echo through eternity. Even fighting like lions, they were not able to hold. They contested the Combine wherever they could, even if they could not stop the landing due to diminished aerospace resources. The dragon had unleashed many of its best, from the Genosians to the Swords of Light. The Sakan of Clan Novacat, Sakan West, fell first, in a desperate defense, as he and his forces were broken by artillery. The last stand of Kempasos, their genetic repositories, was helmed by what few forces they could muster after weeks of fighting the relentless Combine advance. They were worn down, just as their allies had been across so many worlds. And now they were finished. The Gunji no Kanri had been far more powerful than any of their visions had entailed. Now, the only visions that remained were sights of flames, the very ones that would consume Clan Novacat and doom it to the abyss. Warriors of Clan Novacat, I, Taisa Diablo Reed of the 1st Genosha, have a message for you from Yori Kurita, the glorious coordinator of the Draconis Combine. She bids me tell you that this was your last chance, that all of your lives have been expended. Too many times have we faced the consequences of your actions. No more. Today, your clan, like the Smoke Jaguars and so many others before you, dies. There will be no surrender taken, no absolution offered. This is your end. The final attack saw a grisly end, and not even one with dignity. Not even bothering to fight them further, the dragon unleashed its flames. A nuclear weapon was deployed, echoing the horrors of the succession wars that the clans had fled the Inner Sphere to avoid. Con Nostra herself had tried resigning during this crisis, only for her warriors to reject it. They would stand with her until the very end, and this proved true, as she and her Keshik were destroyed as the first warhead struck the facilities. They have employed nuclear weapons against us. The thoughts filtered through Horus's mind. A shockwave rushed to engulf him as well. Artis had the right of it. It ends in fire. The power and wonder that had struck so many upon their arrival in the Inner Sphere, the elite cadre of Novacats, with a history tracing all the way back to the rebels who clung onto Terra, and to those who had abandoned Stefan Amaris, who had found strength in their own spirits, had found the end of their path. Their gamble had failed. They only found freedom in death. The dragon had won. In 3132, just prior to the destruction of Clan Novacat itself, perhaps the most vile, ruthless, and brutal configuration of the Novacat was brought to life in the form of the Eye configuration. In the very year the blackout took place, this horror was unleashed upon the Republic of the Sphere, and eventually was used as a fearsome tiger against the Draconis Combine. It is perhaps one of the most horrifying battlemechs to see appear on the other side of any war zone, if only because of just how frustrating and unforgiving its weaponry is. To start the show, though, it has 21 heatsinks in total, letting it cool 42 per turn, and it's definitely going to need that for what it brings to the field. Let's start with its primary weapons package. A pair of improved heavy large lasers can be found on the mech, with one in each arm. These are the real fangs for tearing into its prey, and perhaps the primary systems that will tax its heatsinks. After this, it has 4 medium pulse lasers, once more divided between the arms, to follow things up, providing accurate fire for when things get into short ranges. But the real killer of this mech is not its lasers. No. It has a pair of TS-EMP cannons, with one in each arm. These are, in a word, horrifying. For those unaware, a TS-EMP cannon can disable a mech in a single contact. Why? Because it can cause the mech to enter shutdown after a successful strike. Even if it doesn't do the maximum effect, it can badly hinder an enemy mech's ability to be controlled, inducing massive penalties. These systems, combined with its other deadly arsenal, means that to be caught by this monster is to be paralyzed, and then to be torn apart by powerful or accurate laser fire. This might truly be the most formidable configuration of this deadly pocket assault, and it is the last true Novacat configuration crafted under its creators. A beautiful and deadly weapon, one which they believed was to bring them freedom on their last tragic adventure through the Draconis Combine. And much as they'd lost the dragon as a friend, many will lose their friends if they begin employing large numbers of TS-EMP cannons. The first Novacat variant crafted after the downfall of the clan whose name it bears, the T variation is an update of the original Prime's formula, and is the work of Clan Seafox. This feels very much like a remix, but one that fundamentally changes the nature of the Omnimech. First things first, it is cooled by 36 every turn, which will not allow the mech to even come close to alpha striking. However, it can allow the mech to bracket fire safely, most assuredly. After this, it has a supercharger, letting the mech move with great bursts of speed, once more however at potential risk of engine damage, especially if the device is abused. When it comes to its weaponry, the T retains the original's twin ER PPCs. These can be used safely if they are fired with one another, or if one ER PPC fires with several other systems. They do fantastic damage, as established before. But replacing the 3 ER large lasers are 3 large pulse lasers. These don't go as far, but are much more accurate and produce less heat overall. They can be fired in tandem without risking the mech's thermals at all, or 2 can be fired with a single PPC, allowing the mech to continue to run heat neutral. Of course, under the right conditions, a horrifying alpha strike can be unleashed, but the mech will overheat dramatically doing so. It is very easy to push the T over its thermal limits if a pilot gets greedy. Save these kinds of strikes for when they are assured, and when they will matter most. Overall, the T is an interesting mech, but one that might not quite live up to the horrifying reputation of the original. He caught a flicker of doubt on Ricard's face at her words. The two of you may be the leaders of the Protectorate by default, but you are not on the same page here. Not by a long shot. Observations by Sakan Peter Kalasa, June 3rd, 3151. Death is the end of one journey, but sometimes it is the beginning of another. It's a part of the cycle of life. This reality was true not only for the Omnimech and industrial output by Clan Novacat, but for the greater clan itself, even if there still was a bleak reality for many of those left behind, after the annihilation of the Novacats proper had been completed. The Novacat Battlemech was only manufactured in one place now, the former Novacat capital of Irisi, and it was no longer populated by the Novacat's lower castes. The Combine's leadership had opted to annihilate the clan in the most severe way, by killing every warrior, as well as sterilizing everyone of lower caste status, before scattering them across the Combine to die in the slums of the state. None were spared, but this meant that the people needed to utilize the advanced clan facilities that built their sophisticated hardware were no longer present. Things take time to learn, especially without people knowing what they are doing at the helm, and instead of knuckling down and gradually understanding the processes in the remaining CAT facilities, Toranaga and House Kurita opted to get military hardware the fast way. They struck a deal with Clan Seafox to take over the direct operation of these industrial facilities, in exchange for military hardware and cooperation, that is. This increased the Seafox's power within the Draconis Combine, while not having to have nearly as much skin in the game as the Novacats had, and it gave them an increased capacity to craft machines for further sale inside of the Inner Sphere. In theory, it's a win-win proposal. It was just a deal, signed in blood, on top of the corpse of Clan Novacat. What did this mean for the Novacat Battlemech? It meant that it was about to once more become a reliable commodity elsewhere. This was now a product for military consumption, and a very dangerous and desired one at that, save for one place. Inside of the Rosselhag Dominion, even a decade after the death of their hated rival, clan warriors turned their noses up at this mechanical monstrosity, viewing it as an inferior mech made to embody an inferior clan. Any examples in their own inventories, from their hard-fought battles with the cats, are typically relegated to Freebirth Kung's army formations, where the mech does see service more regularly, and has an excellent reputation. However, the mech was most prized by one group which emerged from Clan Novacat, yet outside of it. The battle-hardened veterans of the war against the Word of Blake, who after serving alongside Devlin Stone opted to join the Republic of the Sphere, integrated in their own way into their new home. Separation and a new environment, though, does tend to result in variation, inevitably under most conditions with population groups. It proved to be no different within the confines of the new state at the heart of the Inner Sphere. The Novacats here had stuck together, but they'd started to change. Not everyone was born and bred from within the confines of an iron womb, who still called themselves Novacats. In this new land of opportunity, even before the end of the 31st century, these changes had started to take place. Over the course of time, and with prophetic visions behind it, a new significant figure appeared. Kev Rossi, a freeborn, the child of a trueborn clan warrior, Derek Rossi, and a Republic Forces major, Amanda Wilton, emerged. Rossi not only earned his blood name, despite being a freebirth and having an Inner Sphere mother, Rossi experienced several visions in his early life, guiding him towards a destiny he believed would come to pass, and it was something he held almost entirely to himself, sharing it with few others. His visions grew in frequency as he grew older as well. By the age of 30, he'd become not only the leader of Clan Novacat's forces within the realm of Devlin Stone, but by default a senator within the Republic of the Sphere. As the Republic started to come undone in the wake of the HPG blackout, his followers, who now dubbed themselves as the Spirit Cats, began walking a new path, trying to find a safe haven, one which they hoped would lead them away from the foretold destruction that their leader now saw in his visions. They seized several worlds but could not hold them, and as the Fortress Republic was razed, these former Novacats, now Spirit Cats, found themselves lost in the wilderness that had once been their home, now turned into a war zone. However, these warriors, trying to find a peaceful sanctuary, were far from necessarily peaceful themselves, and were often viewed as fanatics or even cultists and deviants to the path of Clan Novacat itself. One Mystic Kishu was given the mission by Clan Novacat proper to return the Spirit Cats to the fold by Oathmaster Kanane, as Con Nostra was clearly preparing to make her move against the Combine. They would need the additional forces of their wayward brethren within the former Republic for their daring but doomed plan. Peaceful restoration was apparently not possible, as the Spirit Cats refused to return to their home clan. After the assassination of several mystics, notably people who were close to Kishu, he came to believe from his own premonitions that the Spirit Cats were responsible, bringing about a clash between the two sides. Kishu declared a trial of annihilation against his Spirit Cat brethren even, but it was a trial that he lost. In this effort, he was defeated by Kev Rossi himself in battle, proving by clan custom that he had not been the one responsible for the crimes he'd been accused of. While the Spirit Cats were vindicated on the battlefield, it was to be a greater tragedy in totality for them. Rossi himself was killed here, mere days before 3137, after he'd defeated Kishu in battle, felled by an assassin himself. It is not known to this day who brought down the founder and leader of the Spirit Cats, but the consequences were devastating. The already wandering Spirit Cats were seemingly now edging towards the very abyss they sought to avoid. Some returned with Kishu to the Draconis Combine, while other clusters, some sent on duties elsewhere, found their way towards their destinies. One group, under Star Colonel Ricard, found their way instead into the former Free Worlds League. Here, they'd fought a bitter campaign against the Merrick-Stewart Commonwealth for the planet of Merrick itself, where Ricard finally seized victory with the help of Clan Seafox and with the help of the Oriente Protectorate. This was to become the beating heart of the remnants of the Spirit Cats and others, as the Republic continued its collapse, and the world turned into a boiling cauldron of chaos all around them. The Spirit Cat survivors here put out a call to all other Spirit Cats to come to them in this storm, but few accepted the invitation. Those that did were to be the main survivors of the legacy of Clan Novacat as a whole, as those that stayed within the Republic found their own doom elsewhere, or slowly trickled into the Protectorate that was forming around Merrick. And those that followed Kishu back to the Combine died with their brethren there, when the wrath of the dragon was unleashed upon them. These survivors inside of the Free Worlds League became an island for their own people, and even some wayward, rejected clanners aside, officially forming into the Clan Protectorate, becoming a province within the reborn Free Worlds League, and helping the League in the battles of the late 3130s. A collection of Novacat refugees also appeared in the Protectorate who were not Spirit Cats in origin, though they were small in number. Of those that had survived the Combine's eradication of Clan Novacat within their borders, those that fled to the Free Worlds League were the only survivors. Some had gone to Rosselhague and were slaughtered there by their age-old rivals, the Ghost Bears. One group of Novacats do remain unaccounted for, however, perhaps the most important outside of the Protectorate. Kisho, possessing some of the key data from their clan, and having whatever civilians and warriors he could rescue, departed the clan before their destruction, but he has not been seen in the decades since their disappearance. Regardless, in the turmoil of these last few remnants that exist within, Ricard Novacat, a man without a blood name, is the captain of the helm, ruling alongside Juliet of Merrick, and the Sea Foxes within the Clan Protectorate. Now, unfortunately, during the Ilclan era, Ricard is trying his best to avoid falling into the orbit of the Ilclan, as many of his people gravitate towards it, including his allies Julieta and the Sea Foxes. If given the chance, he'll continue down the path which saved his people, but only if he can continue to exert the strength needed to do so. Even with that said, though, the Free Worlds League itself is shifting towards war with the Wolf Empire once more, the stated realm of the Ilclan, his warriors, the Spirit Cats, as if reaching out towards the past, looking for the power and wonder of their ancestors, have more than a commanding respect for the Novacat Battlemech. It is their totem, as much as it was the totem of their precursors. While it cannot be built on Merrick, the mech is imported whenever it can be justified. This is their steed, the one which they will ride towards whatever fate their visions offer them. Its might may seem diminished, but for those with confidence in themselves and with honor in their hearts, they will find this beast still burns as brightly as a star in the night sky. The inheritors of this legacy will not quickly forget this totem. Within the enclave that is the Protectorate, the last home of the clan, there is a final dim light of what the Novacats had been, residing with the survivors. But the Spiricats are truly something new. They are changed from their forebears. Even if Kevin Rossi had not lived to see them becoming this incarnation of his ideas, they found the safety, at least for now, that he had hoped for. And they avoided the apocalypse that claimed their Novacat brethren. It will be up to them to hold fast in the face of adversity. It will be up to them to find purpose in their visions, and to understand them as to guide them into an uncertain future. It will be up to these warriors to fight for what they believe in, to stay true to themselves, and to carry on the last legacy of Clan Novacat. Will that tradition be found remaining within the Free Worlds League? Or will it reside within the fortress that is the Wolves' Ilclan? Only time and conflict will tell. Some have already chosen, taking up arms against their now former Inner Sphere allies. But most have yet to decide their fate. Wherever they land, they will go forth with the certainty of destiny at their back. They will carry on the old ways, while honoring who they have become as well. Even if they march to certain doom, they will do so with the burning spirit of the Novacat lighting the way. With luck, however, they will follow a vision that steers them towards a new dawn, and a future where they can stand amongst the peoples of the Inner Sphere, with their heads held high, with pride and dignity, knowing they have finally found the home they have sought for so long. The irony would be, if this new home is to remain within the Free Worlds League, then their journey will have returned to where it started centuries ago, when Philip Drummond, Anna Rossi, and their family sought a quiet place with the former peoples of the Free Worlds League on the Pentagon. Perhaps they can find harmony with the people their founders had. In my dreams it comes for me, leaping from the dark corners of my mind that hides all the things I would rather forget. I try to ignore it, but it has the persistence of a million gnats. In vain, my subconscious throws up a defensive screen. It knows me in all my guises: warrior, lover, connoisseur, and it hungers for me. I never see the shape of the cat. It never shows itself as the sleek, black-furred, ruthless predator I judge myself against each waking moment. It comes as the specter I most fear, and as the object of my greatest desire. It rushes through my blood like adrenaline before combat, sweeping me high above my enemies. From my superior position, I sneer down at those others' pathetic attempts at victory. Those others will never feel the intense, glorious sensations overwhelming my body and mind. The air smells impossibly crisp and clean. Blades of grass caress my bare feet in a tantalizing embrace. I see each pennon of the brilliant emerald feathers of my rivals as they fall upon their foes. I have surpassed even the great birds. None can assail me. Like Icarus, I fly higher and higher until, like Icarus, I fall. The wind burns my cheeks, my eyes fill with water. The ground opens like a gaping black maw to swallow me. I fall back into my weak, cluttered mind, and another shape stirs in the dark corner of my subconscious. From the random mutterings recorded during a Novacat Mechwarrior's convalescence in a Comstar hospital, while recovering from injuries received on Tukiid.